You're too poor to be here. The rich couple mocked the biker, never knowing he owned the entire resort. The rain came down sideways, hammering the mountain road like it had something to prove. Cole Mercer leaned into the wind, his old motorcycle growling beneath him as the headlights of Silver Pines Resort finally broke through the gray sheets of water ahead. His hands, wrapped tight around the handlebars, were numb from the cold. Water dripped off the edge of his helmet and down the back of his neck, but he did not slow down. He had ridden through worse storms than this one. The resort rose up out of the mountainside like something from a dream. Tall pine trees, heavy with snow and rain, stood guard around a building made of stone and timber and glass. Golden light spilled out from every window. Even from a distance, Cole could hear faint music drifting from inside, the kind of soft piano music rich people liked to listen to while they sipped wine they didn't need to work for. He pulled into the parking lot, tires crunching over wet gravel, and killed the engine. For a moment he just sat there, letting the rain fall on him, looking up at the building he had built with his own 2 hands, and every dollar he had ever earned. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Nobody here knew what he looked like. That was exactly how he wanted it. Cole swung his leg over the bike and stood, boots squishing in the mud. His faded leather vest clung to his shoulders, soaked through, the patches on it darkened with rain. He was a big man, broad through the chest, with gray creeping into his beard and lines carved deep into his face from years of sun and hard living. His boots were scuffed and worn thin at the heels. He looked like a man who had nowhere else to be and not much money to be there. That was the point. He walked toward the entrance, and the automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, letting out a wave of warm air that smelled like cedar and fresh coffee. Cole stepped inside, and the noise of the storm disappeared behind him. The lobby was beautiful. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace big enough to stand inside. Guests in fur coats and diamond earrings laughed together near the bar, holding glasses of dark red wine. Somewhere, a string quartet played a slow, quiet song. Nobody looked at Cole. Or rather, they looked, then looked away fast, the way people do when they see something they'd rather not see. A woman in a long silver dress pulled her purse closer to her body. A man in a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars muttered something to his friend and chuckled. Cole didn't react. He had been getting looks like that his whole life. He kept walking, his wet boots leaving dark marks on the polished floor, and he studied everything as he moved. He watched the bartender, exhausted, forcing a smile as a guest complained that his drink wasn't cold enough. He watched a young man in a resort uniform hauling 3 heavy suitcases up a marble staircase, sweat on his brow despite the cold outside. He watched the front desk staff, standing perfectly straight, faces tired but polite, repeating the same greeting over and over like a recording. This was what Cole came to see. Not the chandeliers, not the fireplace, not the wine. He came to see how his resort treated the people who kept it running. He made his way toward the fire, drawn to its warmth after the long, cold ride. A leather armchair sat near the hearth, and beside it, on a small couch, sat a woman in a housekeeping uniform. She looked young, maybe 30, with dark circles under her eyes, and her hair pulled back in a tired ponytail that had started coming loose hours ago. She wasn't looking at the fire. She wasn't looking at anything in the room at all. She was looking down at a small photograph she held between her fingers, worn soft at the edges like she had held it 1,000 times before. Cole lowered himself into the armchair across from her, careful not to startle her. Up close, he could see the photograph clearly. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile, hugging a stuffed rabbit. The woman's thumb moved gently across the photo, back and forth, like she was trying to memorize it. Cole recognized that look. He had seen it before, on the faces of men who had lost everything and were holding on to the one thing that still mattered. She was carrying something heavy. He could see it in the way her shoulders curved forward, the way her eyes had gone somewhere far away. "Bad night to be outside," Cole said, his voice low and rough like gravel under tires. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes went to his vest, his boots, the puddle forming beneath him on the marble floor. He watched her decide something in that quick glance. Most people decided he was trouble, but she just gave him a small, tired smile instead. "Bad night to be inside, too, from the sound of it," she said, nodding toward the windows where the storm still beat against the glass. Cole almost laughed. It was the first honest thing anyone had said to him since he walked through those doors. "Name's Cole," he said, holding out a hand. She hesitated only a second before shaking it. Her grip was firm despite how tired she looked. "Lily? Lily Harper? Long shift?" Lily let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but not quite. "You could say that. I picked up extra hours again, 4th double this week." She glanced down at the photograph, still in her hand, like she'd forgotten it was there, then seemed to remember Cole was watching and started to tuck it away. "Your daughter?" Cole asked gently, nodding at the photo before it disappeared into her pocket. Lily paused, then pulled it back out and held it so he could see it properly. "Emma," she said, and something in her voice changed when she said the name. Softer, warmer, like the word itself was precious. "She's 7, turns 8 in March. She's got a good smile." "She does." Lily's fingers traced the edge of the photograph again. "She smiles about everything. Doesn't matter what kind of day we're having. She just smiles like the whole world's a gift." Cole leaned back in the armchair, letting the fire warm his soaked clothes. "Sounds like a special kid." "She is." Lily's voice wavered just slightly, and she looked away toward the fire, blinking fast. "She was born without much hearing. The doctors said it was severe, right from the start. We've done what we could. Speech therapy, sign language, all of it. But there's this device, a new kind of hearing aid, that could change everything for her, let her hear things clearly for the first time in her life." "But it costs money," Cole said. It wasn't a question. Lily nodded, and for a moment her composure cracked just a little, the exhaustion underneath showing through like a crack in a dam. "More money than I make here in a year. I've been saving every extra dollar, every double shift, every holiday I work instead of staying home with her. I'm getting closer, but—" She shook her head. "Some nights I wonder if I'll ever get there in time. She's growing up so fast. I don't want her to miss any more of the world than she already has." Cole watched her carefully. He had seen plenty of people break under smaller weights than this. But Lily Harper sat straight, chin up, even as her eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. "What do you want most?" Cole asked. "If you could have anything right now?" Lily didn't answer right away. She looked at the photograph one more time, at her daughter's gap-toothed smile, and when she spoke, her voice cracked wide open. "I want to hold her face in my hand someday and say, 'I love you,' and have her hear it. Really hear it. Not read my lips, not feel it in a hug. I want her to hear the words. I want her to know exactly what my voice sounds like when I tell her that." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away fast, almost embarrassed. "That probably sounds silly." "No," Cole said, and he meant it more than she could know. "It doesn't sound silly at all." The fire popped and crackled between them. Somewhere behind them, the string quartet started a new song, soft and slow, but neither of them turned to listen. "Sometimes," Cole said quietly, The biggest miracles come from places you'd never expect. Doors you didn't even know were doors until they open. Lily gave him a small, sad smile, the kind of smile people give when they've stopped believing in miracles but are too polite to say so. That's a nice thought. It's more than a thought, Cole said. He stood, his wet boots creaking against the floor, and gave her a small nod. Get some rest, Lily Harper. You've earned it. Then he turned and walked deeper into the resort, leaving her by the fire with her daughter's photograph, and a stranger's strange promise still hanging in the warm air behind him. Morning light poured through the tall windows of Silver Pines Resort, turning the lobby gold. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the mountains outside dusted with fresh snow, sharp and clean against a bright blue sky. Inside, the resort buzzed with a different kind of energy than the quiet hush of the night before. Guests filled every corner of the lobby now. Women in fur-trimmed coats laughed near the coffee bar. Men in expensive ski jackets compared watches by the fireplace. Children ran between the furniture while their parents called after them, half annoyed and half amused. The string quartet had been replaced by a pianist playing something bright and cheerful, and the smell of fresh pastries drifted from the dining room. Daniel Brooks stood near the front desk, straightening his tie for the third time in 10 minutes. He kept glancing towards the main entrance like he was waiting for something important. He was. The doors opened, and a rush of cold air swept in ahead of Grant and Vanessa Whitmore. Grant walked in first, shaking snow from his shoulders like it had personally offended him. He wore a long black coat that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and his shoes clicked against the marble floor with the confidence of a man who had never once worried about money. His silver hair was combed back perfectly, not a strand out of place despite the wind outside. Vanessa followed a step behind him, quieter, her eyes taking in the lobby with a kind of careful distance. She wore a cream-colored coat and simple pearl earrings, elegant but understated compared to her husband's obvious display. She smiled politely at the staff who greeted them, though it never quite reached her eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, Daniel said, hurrying forward with his hand extended. Welcome back to Silver Pines. We're so honored to have you with us again this year. Grant shook his hand without much interest. Better be a good year, Brooks. Last year the wine selection in the East Wing was an embarrassment. We've corrected that, sir. I promise you'll be pleased. We'll see. Grant looked around the lobby, taking inventory the way he always did, like a king surveying his kingdom. His eyes moved past the pianist, past the fireplace, past the pastry cart. Then they stopped. Cole sat near the fire again in the same worn armchair from the night before. His leather vest was dry now but still faded and cracked at the seams. His boots, scuffed and worn thin at the toes, rested on the stone hearth. He looked exactly like what he was pretending to be. Rough, out of place, a man who didn't belong in a room full of diamonds and cashmere. Grant's face twisted into something between confusion and disgust. Brooks, he said, his voice dropping low but not low enough. Who is that? Daniel followed his gaze and felt his stomach drop. I'm not entirely sure, sir. A guest, I believe. A guest? Grant said the word like it tasted bad in his mouth. Look at him. He looks like he wandered in off the highway. Vanessa touched her husband's arm gently. Grant, maybe we should just go check in. He shook her off, not unkindly, but firmly, the way a man does when he's used to being listened to. This is a 5-star resort, Vanessa. People pay a fortune to feel special here, and they want that. He gestured toward Cole without lowering his voice at all now. That right there makes the whole place look cheap. A few nearby guests turned to look. Some pretended not to notice. Others watched with the kind of curiosity people have when they sense something is about to happen. Cole didn't move. He kept his eyes on the fire, his hands loosely folded in his lap, like he hadn't heard a word. But he had. Every word. Grant took a step closer, his polished shoes clicking against the marble with sharp, deliberate sounds. Daniel hurried after him, already sensing disaster and unsure how to stop it. "Excuse me," Grant said, loud enough now that the pianist's fingers faltered on the keys. "This is a private resort. I don't think you understand what kind of establishment this is." Cole finally looked up. His gray eyes were calm, steady, unreadable. Grant's lip curled. "Do you even know how much a room here costs? This isn't some roadside motel." The lobby had gone quiet now, all eyes turning toward the fireplace, waiting to see what would happen next. Cole set his hands flat on his knees. He didn't stand. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Grant the way a man looks at weather. Something to be waited out, not fought. "I know exactly what this place costs," Cole said quietly. "Do you?" A few people near the coffee bar laughed, quick and nervous, then caught themselves. Grant's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by a man in a cracked leather vest and scuffed boots. He turned to Daniel, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Brooks, is this how Silver Pines treats its real guests? Letting vagrants sit by the fire, scaring away paying customers?" "Sir, I promise we'll look into it right away," Daniel stammered, his hands twisting together. Grant wasn't finished. He turned back to Cole, and something ugly settled over his face, the kind of cruelty that comes easy to people who have never had to fight for anything in their lives. "You're too poor to be here!" Grant shouted. The words rang out across the lobby like a slap. The pianist stopped playing entirely. Children stopped running. Every conversation died at once, and the only sound left was the crackle of the fire and the soft hiss of steam from the coffee bar. Vanessa's face went pale. She reached for Grant's sleeve again, whispering something urgent, but he didn't look at her. Cole's jaw tightened, just slightly. Not from anger, from something closer to sadness. "Kindness doesn't cost anything," Cole said, his voice low but carrying easily through the silent room. "But it seems like some people still can't afford it." A ripple went through the crowd. Someone near the fireplace covered a laugh with a cough. Grant's ears turned red. That was when Lily stepped forward. She had been walking through the lobby with a stack of fresh towels balanced against her hip, heading toward the east wing, when she heard the shouting. She stopped near the front desk, towels forgotten, watching the scene unfold. Her heart pounded. She knew she should keep walking. She knew getting involved could cost her everything. But she looked at Cole sitting there, quiet and dignified, while a rich man tore him apart in front of a room full of strangers, and something inside her refused to stay silent. "That's enough," Lily said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension like a blade. Every head turned toward her now, including Grant's. "Excuse me?" Grant said, his eyebrows shooting up like he couldn't believe a housekeeper had spoken at all. "You heard me." Lily set the towels down on the front desk, her hands trembling slightly, though her voice stayed steady. "He hasn't done anything wrong. He's just sitting there. You don't know anything about him, and you have no right to treat him like trash just because of what he's wearing." Grant's mouth fell open. For a moment he looked genuinely stunned, like a dog that had been swatted on the nose. Then his face hardened into something colder. "Do you know who you're talking to?" he said, his voice dropping into a dangerous quiet. "I know exactly who I'm talking to," Lily said. "Someone who thinks money makes him better than everyone else in this room." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's hand covered her mouth. Daniel's face had gone white as paper. Grant turned to Daniel, his voice shaking now with fury. "Brooks, this woman just insulted me in front of my wife and half your guest list. I want her fired. Today." "Grant," Vanessa said softly, "please, she was only—" "I don't want to hear it, Vanessa." He didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Daniel, cold and demanding. "Fire her, or my family will never set foot in this resort again, and I'll make sure every friend of mine knows exactly why." Daniel's throat worked up and down. He glanced at Lily, whose eyes had filled with tears she was fighting hard not to let fall. He glanced at Cole, still sitting silently by the fire. Then he glanced at Grant, whose name was attached to more reservations and donations than almost anyone else who walked through those doors. "Lily," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper, "please go to my office. I need to speak with you." Lily's face crumpled just for a moment before she forced it back into something steady. She nodded once, picked up the towels with shaking hands, and walked away without another word, her eyes fixed on the floor the whole way across the lobby. Grant straightened his coat, satisfied, like a man who had just won something important. Vanessa stood frozen beside him, staring at the spot where Lily had disappeared, her expression unreadable. Lily made it as far as the employee hallway before her legs stopped working right. She set the towels down on a metal cart pushed against the wall and pressed her back against the cold concrete. The hallway smelled like bleach and old coffee. Somewhere down the corridor, a dryer thumped in a steady rhythm, and a radio played faintly from the laundry room. Some song about summer that felt like it belonged to a different world than the one she was standing in now. Her hands were still shaking. She looked down at them like they belonged to someone else. "Stupid," she whispered to herself. "Stupid, stupid, stupid." She hadn't meant to say anything. She had told herself 100 times over the years that this was the way things worked. Rich people got to say whatever they wanted, and everyone else just had to swallow it and keep moving. That was the deal. That was how she kept her job, how she kept the lights on, how she kept saving those small stacks of bills in the coffee can on top of the refrigerator, the one Emma didn't know about, the one that was supposed to turn into a hearing device someday. But when she'd seen that man sitting there so quiet, taking every ugly word without flinching, something in her had just cracked open. She couldn't explain it. She only knew she couldn't watch it happen and stay silent, not even to save herself. Now she was going to pay for it. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold floor, knees pulled up to her chest, and she let herself cry. Not loud. She didn't have the energy for loud, just quiet, hitching breaths that shook her shoulders, tears sliding down her face and dripping off her chin. She thought about Emma's coffee can savings. $640. It had taken her 8 months to save that much, working extra shifts, skipping lunches, walking instead of taking the bus when the weather allowed it. The device Emma needed cost $12,000. She had been so far from that number it barely felt real, but at least it had felt possible. Now, without this job, even that small possibility was gone. She thought about Emma's face, the way her daughter watched people's mouths when they talked, trying so hard to catch pieces of words she couldn't fully hear. She thought about how Emma still smiled anyway, every single day, like the world hadn't handed her something unfair. "I'm sorry, baby," Lily whispered into her knees. "I'm so sorry." She didn't hear the footsteps at first. It was the creak of the door at the end of the hallway that made her look up, swiping quickly at her face with the back of her hand, trying to make herself look like she hadn't fallen apart. It was Cole. He walked slowly, like he wasn't in any hurry, his boots quiet against the concrete floor. He stopped a respectful distance away and lowered himself down until he was sitting on an overturned crate across from her. Not too close, not looming over her the way Grant had loomed over everyone in the lobby. "You didn't have to do that," Lily said, wiping her nose. "Back there. You're going to get me in more trouble." "I don't think I'm the one who got you in trouble," Cole said gently. Lily let out a wet, broken laugh. "No, I guess I did that myself." "You stood up for somebody who couldn't stand up for himself in that room," Cole said. "That's not trouble, that's character." "Character doesn't pay for hearing devices," Lily said before she could stop herself. She immediately looked embarrassed, like she'd said too much. "Sorry, that's not... You don't need to hear about my problems." "Tell me about her," Cole said quietly. "Your girl." Lily hesitated, then found herself talking anyway, the words coming out slow and tired. She told him about Emma's smile, about the coffee can, about how close and how impossibly far $12,000 felt. Cole listened without interrupting, his face calm, his eyes steady on hers the whole time. "You're going to be okay," he said finally. "I promise you that." Lily didn't believe him. Not really. But something about the way he said it made her chest feel a little less tight. Cole stood, nodded once, and walked back down the hallway toward the lobby, his jaw set tight with something that looked a lot like quiet resolve. That evening, Cole moved through Silver Pines like a man who already knew every turn before he made it. Daniel Brooks followed him, though he wasn't sure why. He'd found the strange biker standing near the fireplace after the last guests had gone up to their rooms, and something about the look on Cole's face had made Daniel forget to ask him to leave. "Sir," Daniel said, hurrying to keep pace. "This area is for staff only. Guests aren't permitted past the lobby doors." Cole didn't slow down. "I know." "Then you understand I need to ask you to turn around." "You can ask," Cole said. "Doesn't mean I will." Daniel's stomach twisted. This was how these things went wrong, he thought. A guest wanders somewhere he shouldn't. Security gets called, there's a scene, and somehow it becomes the manager's fault by morning. He thought about his job, about the mortgage payment due in 10 days, about the Whitmores and their endless complaints. But there was something in the way Cole walked, unhurried and certain, that made Daniel's usual scripts die in his throat. They passed the laundry room, the linen closets, the break room where a single light still burned over a coffee maker nobody had bothered to turn off. Cole's boots were quiet on the polished floor, quieter than Daniel would have expected from a man his size. Finally, Cole stopped in front of a door at the end of a short hallway. The hallway itself was one Daniel rarely walked through anymore, tucked away behind the main corridors, forgotten by everyone except the cleaning staff who dusted it once a week out of habit. The door had a brass plate on it, worn smooth in places from years of hands touching it. It read, "Owner." "Sir," Daniel said, his voice tightening, "that's a private office. Nobody goes in there, not even me." Cole reached into the pocket of his worn leather vest. His fingers closed around something small and cold, and when he pulled his hand back out, Daniel saw an old brass key resting in his palm. It looked like it had been carried for years, the metal darkened and smoothed by time. "That door hasn't been opened in months," Daniel said, more to himself than to Cole. "Nobody has a key to that room except—" He stopped. Cole slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click, like it had been waiting. The door swung open. Daniel stood frozen in the hallway as Cole stepped inside and flipped on a lamp sitting on an old wooden desk. Warm light spread across the room, and Daniel's breath caught in his chest. The walls were covered in photographs. Some were faded and yellowed with age, showing a much younger Cole standing in front of a half-built structure that Daniel slowly realized was Silver Pines itself, back when it had been nothing more than a foundation and a dream. Other photos showed groups of men on motorcycles, arms slung around each other's shoulders, laughing at some joke lost to time. There were newspaper clippings framed on the wall, headlines about the resort's opening, about local charity events, about a young biker who had built something nobody believed a man like him could build. On the desk sat a stack of papers Daniel recognized immediately: ownership documents, deeds, files he had only ever seen referenced in emails from corporate, always signed by someone whose name Daniel had never actually connected to a face. The name on every single page was the same: Cole Mercer. Daniel's legs felt weak. He reached out and steadied himself against the doorframe, his mind racing to catch up with what his eyes were telling him. "You," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You're not just a guest." Cole turned to face him, his expression calm, almost gentle, the same way it had been all day. "No," Cole said. "I'm not." Daniel looked from Cole's weathered face to the photographs on the wall, to the documents on the desk, to the brass key still resting in the lock of a door that only one man in the world was supposed to be able to open. "You own Silver Pines," Daniel said slowly, like he needed to hear himself say the words out loud to believe them. "This whole resort, it's yours." Cole nodded once, his eyes steady on Daniel's stunned face. "Every stone of it," Cole said quietly. The next morning, the staff dining hall filled with every employee Silver Pines had. Housekeepers still in their uniforms stood next to kitchen cooks in white aprons. Front desk clerks whispered to each other, wondering why Daniel had called an emergency meeting before the sun was even fully up. Nobody knew what was happening. Word had spread fast overnight, but most people thought it was some kind of joke. Then Cole walked in. He wore the same faded leather vest from the day before. His boots still carried dust from the parking lot. But something about the way people looked at him now was different. Daniel stood beside him, his face pale, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, like a man trying to hold himself together. "Some of you already heard," Daniel said, his voice shaking slightly. "But I want you all to hear it from him." Cole stepped forward. The room went quiet. Even the coffee machine in the corner seemed to stop gurgling, like it too was waiting to hear what he had to say. "My name is Cole Mercer," he said. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that did not need to be loud to be heard. "I own Silver Pines Resort." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back dropped a mug, and it shattered against the tile floor, but nobody moved to pick it up. "Every year," Cole continued, "I come here without telling anyone who I am. I dress like this. I sit in the lobby. I watch. I listen. Because I learned a long time ago that people show you who they really are when they think nobody important is watching." He looked around the room, his eyes moving slowly over every face. "Yesterday, I watched a woman get humiliated for defending a stranger," Cole said. "I watched a manager apologize to the people who caused the harm instead of protecting the person who did nothing wrong." Daniel's shoulders sank. He did not try to defend himself. He simply stood there and took it, because he knew every word was true. "That ends today," Cole said. He asked Lily to step forward. She had been standing near the back, her hands twisted together, unsure if she was about to be fired all over again. When she reached the front of the room, Cole looked at her with something like respect. "Lily Harper is reinstated," Cole said. "Full pay, full hours, and she has my personal apology for what happened to her." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. She simply nodded, her chin trembling. Cole turned back to the room. Starting today, there is a new rule at Silver Pines. No guest, no matter how much money they spend, is allowed to humiliate, threaten, or mistreat any employee here. If it happens, that guest will be asked to leave. It does not matter who they are. A few employees exchanged glances, some in disbelief, some already smiling like they could not remember the last time someone had stood up for them like this. A person's value, Cole said, is not measured by the clothes they wear or the money in their account. It is measured by the kindness they leave behind. I built this place because I believe that. I will not let it become something else. Later that morning, Cole asked Daniel to bring Grant and Vanessa Whitmore to the lobby. When the couple arrived, Grant's face was already twisted with irritation, ready to complain about being summoned so early. But when he saw Cole standing there, dressed exactly as he had been the day before, his expression shifted into confusion, then disbelief. "You," Grant said. "What is this?" "This is the man who owns Silver Pines," Daniel said quietly. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Grant's face went red, then pale, as the truth settled over him like a weight he could not lift. Cole did not gloat. He simply watched them absorb what they had done. Later, alone in the office, Cole sat down at the old desk and began going through guest correspondence, something he did every visit to understand what people truly needed. Buried in a folder of unread messages, he found an email from Vanessa Whitmore, sent weeks earlier, asking quietly and privately how she might help pay for a child's hearing device. The child's name was Emma Harper. Cole read the email 3 times. The first time he thought he had misunderstood it. The second time, he checked the date to make sure it was real. The third time, he leaned back in his chair and stared at the wall, trying to make sense of something that did not add up. The email was short, simple. No signature line with fancy titles, no mention of the Whitmore name dropped like a business card. Just a woman asking a quiet question. "I would like to help cover the cost of a hearing device for a child named Emma Harper. Please let me know how I can do this without her mother knowing where the money came from." Cole read the last part again. Without her mother knowing. He thought about the woman he had seen the day before, standing beside Grant in the lobby, silent while her husband tore into Lily. She had not said a word. She had not stepped in. She had let it happen, her eyes fixed on the floor like she was trying to disappear into the carpet. And yet here was proof that weeks before any of that happened, she had reached out to help the very same family Grant humiliated. None of it made sense. Cole set the paper down on the desk and rubbed his jaw, the stubble rough under his fingers. He had run this resort long enough to know that people were rarely simple. Kindness and cowardice could live in the same heart. He had seen it in himself once, a long time ago, back when he was young and scared and let fear make decisions for him. But he needed to understand Vanessa Whitmore, not to judge her, not to punish her. He needed to know what kind of woman would secretly try to save a little girl's chance to hear, and then stand silent while that same girl's mother was torn apart in front of a room full of strangers. He picked up the office phone and dialed the front desk. "This is Cole," he said when Daniel answered. "I need you to arrange something for me. Quietly." "Of course," Daniel said, his voice still carrying the shakiness of a man who had spent the whole morning wondering if he still had a job. "What do you need?" "Ask Mrs. Whitmore if she would be willing to meet with me. Alone. This afternoon, if possible. Somewhere private. Not the lobby." There was a pause on the other end. "Alone? Are you sure that's wise, given everything that happened with her husband?" "I'm not asking to meet with Grant," Cole said. "Just her." Daniel did not argue further. I'll see what I can do. Cole hung up the phone and looked down at the email one more time before folding the paper carefully and placing it inside his vest pocket. He wanted to have it with him. He wanted to see her face when he brought it up, to watch her reaction the way he had watched Grant's reaction that morning. An hour later, Daniel called back to say Vanessa had agreed to meet him at 4 o'clock in the small reading room off the east wing of the resort. It was a quiet space, tucked away from the main lobby, lined with old bookshelves and a fireplace that rarely got used. Guests sometimes wandered in looking for a quiet place to read, but most of the time, it sat empty. Cole arrived early. He sat in one of the leather chairs near the fireplace, letting the silence settle around him while he waited. He thought about Lily, about the fear in her eyes when she thought she might lose her job. He thought about Emma, a little girl he had never met, whose whole world could open up if she got the chance to hear clearly for the first time. And he thought about Vanessa, standing in the shadow of her husband, saying nothing while someone else took the blame for a stranger's kindness. At exactly 4 o'clock, the door opened. Vanessa stepped inside slowly, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes uncertain. She looked different than she had the day before. Smaller, somehow. Less sure of herself. "You wanted to see me?" she said quietly, closing the door behind her. Cole gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." She hesitated for a moment before walking over and lowering herself into the seat, her posture stiff, like she was bracing for something. Cole reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper. He set it gently on the small table between them, turning it so she could see it clearly. Vanessa's eyes dropped to the page, and her face went pale the instant she recognized her own words staring back at her. Vanessa stared at the paper for a long moment. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out, then pulled back, as though touching it would make everything more real. "How did you get this?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I own this resort," Cole said simply. "Every email that comes through our guest services eventually crosses my desk. I read this one 3 times before I understood what I was looking at." Vanessa closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears had gathered at the edges. "You must think I'm a hypocrite." "I don't think anything yet," Cole said. "I'm here because I want to understand, that's all." She was quiet for a long time, her fingers twisting together in her lap. The fireplace crackled softly beside them, though neither of them looked at it. Finally, she spoke. "When I was 6 years old, I got very sick. A fever that wouldn't break for days. By the time it passed, something inside my ears had changed. I couldn't hear right anymore. Sounds came through like they were wrapped in cotton. My mother would call my name from across the room and I wouldn't even know she was talking." Cole listened without interrupting, his eyes steady on her face. "My parents had money," Vanessa continued. "They got me the best doctors, the best devices money could buy. Eventually, I could hear almost normally again. But before that happened, there were 2 years where I sat in classrooms and understood maybe half of what my teachers said. 2 years where other kids thought I was slow or strange because I answered questions wrong or didn't respond when they talked to me." Her voice cracked slightly. "Do you know what it feels like to be in a room full of people and still feel completely alone? To watch mouths moving and catch only pieces of what they're saying? I used to lie in bed and cry because I was so tired of pretending I understood things I didn't." Cole leaned forward slightly. "That sounds like a lonely way to grow up." It was. Vanessa wiped at her eyes. "So, when I heard about Lily's daughter, about Emma, I felt like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out a memory I'd buried for 30 years. I knew exactly what that little girl was going through. I knew what it would mean for her to finally hear clearly. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing." So you reached out, Cole said, glancing at the paper on the table. I did. Vanessa's jaw tightened. I found out how much the device cost. I was ready to write the check myself, quietly, so nobody would ever have to know it came from me. I didn't want thanks, I just wanted to help. What happened? Vanessa's shoulders sank. The confidence she had carried into the room completely drained away. Grant found the email before I sent it. He was furious. He said if word got out that we were handing out charity to hotel staff, people would think we had money problems, or worse, that we felt sorry for people beneath us. He said it would make us look weak. Cole's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes hardened. So he told you to drop it. He told me if I sent that money, he would make sure everyone knew I had gone against his wishes. He said our reputation was the only thing that mattered, that people like Lily could figure things out on their own the way everyone else has to. Vanessa's voice grew bitter. I let him convince me. I told myself I would find another way, some way to help without him knowing. But I never did. I was too afraid of what he would do. And yesterday, Cole said quietly, you stood there and watched him tear her apart in the lobby. Vanessa flinched like she had been struck. I know. I hate myself for that. I wanted to say something. I wanted to defend her. But years of being told to stay quiet, to let Grant handle things, it does something to a person. It makes you small. It makes you forget you have a voice at all. Cole studied her for a long moment. Vanessa, I've spent my whole life around people who judged me before they knew a thing about me. I know what it feels like to be dismissed. But I also know that the moment you let fear make your choices for you, you stop being yourself. Vanessa looked up at him, her eyes red but steady. I don't know how to stop being afraid of him. You don't have to know how, Cole said. You just have to decide that being afraid isn't worth losing who you really are underneath it. Vanessa walked the long hallway back to her suite with the paper still clutched in her hand. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, but she barely heard the sound. Her mind was somewhere else, back in a childhood bedroom, back in a classroom where she couldn't understand the teacher's words. By the time she reached the door, her hands were no longer trembling. They were steady, the way hands get right before someone does something they've been afraid to do for a long time. Grant was sitting by the window when she walked in, a glass of scotch in his hand, his laptop open on the table in front of him. He didn't look up right away. Where have you been? He asked, his voice flat. Talking to Cole Mercer, Vanessa said. That got his attention. Grant set down his glass and turned to face her fully. The biker? Why on earth would you waste your time with him? Because he owns this resort, Grant. He has owned it the whole time. Vanessa watched the words land, watched Grant's face shift from confusion to disbelief to something like anger. And he showed me the email I sent about Emma's hearing device, the one you told me to bury. Grant's jaw tightened. So he's trying to use that against us now. Typical. People like him always look for an angle. He's not using anything against us, Vanessa said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that hadn't been there before. He just wanted to understand why a woman who wanted to help a little girl let her husband talk her out of it. I didn't talk you out of anything, Grant snapped. I made a decision that protected our family's reputation. You would have handed over money to a housekeeper and let the whole resort think we're some kind of charity case. She's not a charity case, Grant. She's a mother trying to help her daughter here. Vanessa's voice cracked, but she pushed through it. A daughter who reminds me of myself. Do you even remember what I told you about my childhood? About the 2 years I couldn't understand half of what people said to me? That was a long time ago, Grant said, waving his hand like he was swatting away a fly. It has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this. Vanessa's voice rose, surprising them both. I know what that little girl is feeling right now. I know what it's like to sit in a room full of people and feel completely invisible. And I had the chance to change that for her. I had the money sitting right there, ready to send. And you took that chance away from me because you were afraid of what people might think." Grant stood up, his face reddening. "I was protecting us. Do you understand what happens when people think you're weak? They take advantage of you. They stop respecting you. I built everything we have by never showing weakness, and I'm not about to let some housekeeper's sob story unravel that." Vanessa stared at him. Really stared, like she was seeing him for the first time in years. "Is that what you think I am? A weakness?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Vanessa set the paper down on the table between them. "I have spent 10 years asking your permission to feel things, Grant. 10 years shrinking myself down so I wouldn't embarrass you. And the whole time, I told myself it was because you loved me, because you wanted to protect me. But that's not what this is. This is control. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm finally seeing clearly." Vanessa felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been buried under years of silence. "You didn't stop me from helping Emma because it would make us look weak. You stopped me because you needed me to believe I couldn't do anything without your approval. And I let you because I was scared of losing you. But I'm more scared now of losing myself." Grant opened his mouth to argue, but Vanessa held up her hand. "I'm done asking for permission to be kind," she said. "I'm done letting your fear decide who I am. Emma deserves to hear her mother's voice. Lily deserves respect. And I deserve to stop hiding behind your money like it's the only thing that gives me worth." The great room at Silver Pines had been transformed. Rows of chairs filled the space where guests usually sipped coffee by the fire. A small stage stood near the tall windows, and outside, snow fell soft and slow over the mountains, like the sky itself was paying attention. Cole stood at the front of the room in a clean button-up shirt, his leather vest still on underneath his jacket, the one piece of himself he never left behind. His hands were steady on the podium, but his heart was pounding harder than it had in years. He looked out at the crowd. Employees sat beside guests. Local families sat beside investors. Lily sat in the second row with Emma on her lap, the little girl's eyes wide and curious, watching everything. "Thank you all for coming," Cole said. His voice was calm, the way it always was. But there was something warmer in it today. "I want to tell you about something I've been thinking about for a long time. Something bigger than this resort." He paused, looking down at the podium, then back up. "When I built Silver Pines, I wanted it to be more than a place with nice rooms and good food. I wanted it to be a place where people mattered, where nobody got looked over because of what they wore or how much money they had in the bank." A few heads nodded. Daniel, standing near the back wall, crossed his arms and listened closely. "But I realized something this past week," Cole went on. "Caring about people isn't just about how we treat them when they walk through our doors. It's about what we do to help them when they're struggling somewhere else, somewhere we can't always see." He looked at Lily. She looked back at him, her hand resting gently on Emma's shoulder. "There are families out there right now who love someone who needs help. A hearing device, a wheelchair, therapy that costs more than they'll ever make in a year. They aren't asking for handouts. They're asking for a chance." Cole reached for a folder on the podium and held it up. "That's why, starting today, Silver Pines Resort is launching the Silver Pines Accessibility Foundation. Its whole purpose is to help families afford the medical equipment and support services their children need. Hearing devices, mobility tools, whatever it takes to give a kid a fair shot at the world." The room broke into applause. Lily pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes shining. Emma looked up at her mother, confused but smiling, sensing something good was happening even if she couldn't hear every word of it. Cole waited for the clapping to settle before he continued. This foundation isn't going to be run by me sitting behind a desk somewhere. It needs someone who understands what these families are going through, someone who knows the fear and the hope that comes with all of this. He turned his head, searching the crowd until he found Vanessa standing near the side wall, her arms wrapped loosely around herself, looking like she wasn't sure if she belonged in the room at all. "Vanessa," Cole said, and every head turned toward her. "Would you come up here for a moment?" Vanessa hesitated. Her cheeks flushed as she walked toward the stage, aware of every eye following her. She stopped beside Cole, unsure what to say. Cole lowered his voice so only she could hear, though the room stayed quiet, waiting. "I want you to lead this foundation, Vanessa. Not because of your money, because of what you know, what you lived through as a kid. Nobody in this room understands Emma's world the way you do." Vanessa's throat tightened. "I stayed silent, Cole. I let Lily get humiliated. I let my own fear stop me from helping when I could have." "I know," Cole said gently. "But you're not that person anymore. You proved that the moment you told the truth to Grant, the moment you stopped protecting comfort and started protecting people." Vanessa looked out at the crowd, at Lily holding Emma close, at the room full of hopeful faces waiting for her answer. She thought of the little girl in the mirror all those years ago, sitting alone in a quiet classroom, wishing someone understood. "Okay," Vanessa said, her voice shaking but sure. "I'll do it. I'll lead the foundation." The applause was still fading when Grant walked through the doors at the back of the great room. He had not been invited. Nobody had called him. But word traveled fast in a place like Silver Pines, and Grant Whitmore had spies everywhere, waiters and desk clerks who still remembered which guests tipped the biggest and feared losing that money more than they feared doing right. He stood at the back, his tailored coat still dusted with snow, his face hard as stone. He watched Vanessa standing on the stage next to Cole. He watched her say yes. Something in his chest turned to ice. He did not wait for the event to end. He turned and walked out into the cold, pulling his phone from his pocket before the doors had even swung shut behind him. Later that night, Cole found Vanessa in the hallway outside the great room, her arms wrapped around a stack of folders for the foundation. Her face was pale. "He knows," she said before Cole could ask. "Grant knows I said yes. He was in the back of the room." Cole's jaw tightened. "How do you know?" "He texted me." Vanessa held up her phone, her hand trembling slightly. "He said I embarrassed him. He said I made a fool out of both of us in front of people who matter." "People who matter," Cole repeated quietly. "Funny. I always thought Lily and Emma mattered plenty." Vanessa almost smiled, but the fear in her eyes did not fade. The fear was right to be there. By morning, the calls started. Daniel was the one who brought the news to Cole's office, his face drawn and tired, a legal pad full of names in his hand. "3 investors pulled their commitments overnight," he said. "The Hendersons canceled their anniversary reservation. So did the Blackwell family. That's 20 rooms gone in one morning." Cole sat behind his desk, arms crossed, listening without interrupting. "There's more," Daniel said. "Grant's been calling around. He's telling people you're using the resort to push some kind of personal agenda. He's saying the foundation is a publicity stunt, that you don't actually care about these families. You're just trying to make yourself look good so people forget you're a biker who doesn't belong running a place like this." Cole's eyes stayed steady, but something in his chest ached at the words. He had heard versions of that insult his whole life. He thought he had made peace with it years ago. Apparently, old wounds never closed all the way. "He's not stopping there," Daniel continued. "He's reaching out to the board, telling them the changes you made, the employee protections, the foundation, all of it is reckless. He's saying it's scaring away the resort's most valuable guests, and if the board doesn't step in, Silver Pines could lose millions this year alone. Cole rubbed a hand over his jaw. And the board? What are they saying? They're nervous, Daniel admitted. A few of them already called me asking if the rumors are true. Asking if you're really turning Silver Pines into something different than what it was built to be. It is something different, Cole said quietly. That was the whole point. Daniel hesitated at the door. I know, Cole. I believe in what you're doing. I saw Emma's face last night when she heard her mother's voice. I'm not going to forget that. But if the money keeps drying up, the board might not care about Emma's face. They'll care about the numbers. After Daniel left, Cole sat alone in his office, staring out the window at the mountains, gray and quiet under the winter sky. Word spread through the resort like a cold wind moving through the halls. Employees whispered in the break room, worried about their jobs. Some who had cheered for Cole the night before now avoided his eyes in the hallway, afraid of being caught supporting the wrong side if the resort's fortunes turned. Grant's rumors grew louder with each passing hour, twisting further from the truth every time they were repeated. By evening, stories were circling that Cole had built the entire foundation just to distract people from financial trouble at the resort. Others claimed he was forcing Vanessa into the role to embarrass Grant publicly, using her pain for his own reputation. None of it was true. But truth had never stopped fear from spreading once it found a foothold, and fear was moving through Silver Pines Resort now, quiet and cold, room by room. Cole left the resort just after noon, telling no one where he was going. He climbed onto his old Harley, the one he kept in the back of the maintenance garage, covered by a canvas tarp most of the year. It was not the newest bike he owned. It was the oldest, the one with the cracked seat and the dent in the tank from a spill he took 20 years ago on a road outside Reno. He never fixed that dent. He kept it on purpose. The engine roared to life under him, and for the first time in days, Cole felt something in his chest loosen. He rode down the mountain, through the trees still heavy with snow, until the road leveled out near the small town of Cedar Falls. He pulled into a gravel lot in front of a garage with a faded sign that read, Miller's Motorcycle Repair. The building looked tired, its metal roof rusted at the edges, but the smell of oil and gasoline that drifted out the open bay door was as familiar to Cole as his own name. An old man in grease-stained coveralls looked up from beneath a motorcycle propped on a lift. His face broke into a grin. Well, I'll be, the man said, wiping his hands on a rag. Cole Mercer. Didn't think you'd remember this place. Hey, Frank. Cole swung off his bike and shook the old mechanic's hand. I remember everything about this place. Frank had owned the garage for almost 40 years. He was the man who taught Cole how to rebuild an engine when Cole was 25 years old and had nothing but a duffel bag and a busted motorcycle he bought for $200. Back then, Cole had nowhere else to go. His family had turned their backs on him after he dropped out of college to ride with a group of bikers who became, in every way that mattered, his real family. Cole walked slowly through the garage, running his hand along an old workbench covered in tools that had not moved in years. He remembered sitting on a stool in the corner, 17 years old, listening to men twice his age tell him he would never amount to anything because he wore a leather vest instead of a suit. He remembered walking into diners along the highway and watching waitresses lock their eyes on him the moment he stepped through the door, deciding before he even opened his mouth that he was trouble. He remembered banks that would not give him a loan, landlords who would not rent him an apartment, people who crossed the street when they saw him coming, clutching their purses tighter, assuming the leather and the tattoos meant something dangerous instead of something earned. He had been Grant's version of Cole once, judged, dismissed, written off before anyone bothered to learn his name. But he had also been Lily, powerless in front of people who held all the money and all the control. Frank came and stood beside him, arms crossed, watching Cole's face carefully. "You look like a man carrying something heavy," Frank said. Cole let out a slow breath. "People are trying to tear down something I built. Say I'm making a mistake by caring more about people than profit." Frank chuckled, low and rough. "Funny. That's exactly what they said about you 30 years ago. Told you a biker like you would never build anything worth having." Cole almost smiled. "Guess some things don't change." "No," Frank said. "But you did. You built something real, Cole. And real things get tested. That don't mean they're wrong." Cole thought of his brothers back then, the men who had nothing to their name but their word and their loyalty. They never had money. They never had status. But when one of them needed help, they showed up without question, riding through storms and across state lines because loyalty meant something to them that money never could buy. That was the thing Grant would never understand. Character wasn't measured by a bank account. It was measured by what a person did when no one was watching, when there was nothing to gain. Cole climbed back onto his bike as the afternoon light began to fade behind the mountains. He knew now, with a certainty that settled deep in his chest, exactly what Silver Pines needed to become. Not a place that measured a person's worth by the size of their wallet. A place that measured worth by the size of someone's heart. The letter came on a Tuesday. Lily almost did not open it. She was standing in the small kitchen of her apartment, still in her work uniform, sorting through a stack of bills that never seemed to get smaller. The envelope sat at the bottom of the pile, plain and white, with the Silver Pines Resort logo stamped in the corner. She almost tossed it aside, thinking it was just another notice about schedule changes or a new policy memo. But something made her stop. She set down the electric bill in her hand and picked up the envelope instead. Her fingers were not quite steady as she tore it open. The letter was short, simple, but every word hit her like a wave. "Dear Ms. Harper, we are pleased to inform you that Emma Harper has been approved for full sponsorship through the Silver Pines Accessibility Foundation. This sponsorship includes complete coverage for a state-of-the-art hearing device, along with ongoing support services for as long as needed." Lily read the words twice. Then a third time. Her eyes blurred, and she had to blink hard to keep reading. There was no cost to her. Not one single dollar. Her legs felt weak, and she reached out to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to steady herself. The room seemed to tilt for a moment, not because anything was wrong, but because something so right had finally happened after months of praying for it in the dark. Emma was in the next room, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, drawing pictures of horses on a piece of notebook paper. She looked up when she heard her mother's breathing change, when she heard the small broken sound that escaped Lily's throat. "Mommy?" Lily walked into the living room, the letter shaking gently in her hand. She knelt down in front of her daughter, the same way she always did when she wanted Emma to see her lips clearly, to read the words even if she could not hear them all. "Emma," Lily said slowly, carefully, "you are going to get your hearing device." Emma blinked. She had heard those words spoken before, always followed by disappointment, always followed by her mother saying not yet, or we are still saving, or soon, baby, soon. But this time was different. This time Lily was crying, and she was smiling at the same time, and she pulled Emma into her arms so tightly that the little girl giggled against her shoulder. "Really?" Emma asked, pulling back to look at her mother's face. "Really?" Lily said. "Mr. Cole is making it happen." You are going to hear so many things, sweet girl. You are going to hear birds and music and my voice, all clear as day." Emma's eyes went wide, and for a long moment she said nothing at all. She simply looked at her mother like she was trying to memorize this exact second. The way the afternoon light came through the window, the way her mother's hands felt warm against her cheeks. Then she threw her arms around Lily's neck and held on tight. The days that followed passed in a blur of paperwork and appointments, but none of it felt like a burden anymore. Every form Lily signed felt like a gift. Every phone call from the foundation felt like proof that the world could still be kind. The charity gathering was set to take place on a Saturday evening in the grand ballroom of Silver Pines Resort, the same room where wealthy guests usually gathered for cocktail parties and champagne toasts. But this time, the guest list looked different. Cole had invited resort employees, from housekeepers to kitchen staff to the young men who parked cars in the freezing cold. He had invited families from Cedar Falls who had struggled quietly for years, families who had never once been invited into a room like that. And he had invited his brothers, the Hells Angels who had ridden with him through every storm of his life, men with leather vests and gray beards and hearts as loyal as any Cole had ever known. On the morning of the gathering, Lily stood in Emma's bedroom, carefully brushing her daughter's hair into 2 neat braids. Emma wore a soft blue dress, the nicest one she owned, and she kept looking at herself in the mirror, turning side to side. "Do I look nice?" Emma asked, her hands moving in the small signs Lily had taught her over the years. Lily smiled, kneeling down to tie the ribbon at the end of one braid. "You look beautiful," she said. "Today is your day, baby." The ballroom at Silver Pines had never looked like this before. Instead of long tables covered in white cloth and towers of champagne glasses, there were rows of folding chairs filled with people who had never been allowed in this room as guests. Housekeepers sat next to kitchen workers. Valets sat next to families from Cedar Falls who had come in their best clothes, some of them a little worn at the collar but pressed with care. Near the back, a line of Hell's Angels stood with their arms crossed, leather vests creaking, faces stern until you noticed the way their eyes softened every time they looked toward the front of the room. Lily stood near the small stage that had been set up, her hands twisted together in front of her. Emma stood beside her in the blue dress, her braids still perfect, her eyes wide as she looked around at all the faces watching her. Cole stood a few feet away, dressed simply as always, his leather vest a little out of place among the folding chairs and the soft lighting, but nobody in that room would have dared to say so now. Everyone there knew exactly who he was. Beside him stood a woman from the foundation holding a small case. "Emma," Cole said, kneeling down so he was at her eye level. His voice was gentle, the same voice that had once told Lily that miracles come from unexpected places. "Are you ready?" Emma looked at her mother first. Lily nodded, blinking back tears that were already gathering at the corners of her eyes. Emma nodded too. The woman from the foundation opened the case carefully. Inside sat the hearing device, small and delicate, catching the light of the ballroom chandeliers. She showed Emma how it would fit, speaking slowly, using the same careful signs Lily had used with Emma her whole life. Emma sat very still while the device was placed behind her ear. The room seemed to hold its breath along with her. Somewhere in the back, one of the Hells Angels wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and pretended he was just scratching his beard. The woman adjusted a small switch. "There," she said softly. "It is on now." For a moment, Emma did not move. She sat frozen, her small hands gripping the edges of her chair, her eyes wide with something between fear and wonder. Lily knelt down in front of her daughter, the way she always did, so Emma could see her face clearly. Her hands were shaking. "Emma," Lily said, her voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" The room was so quiet that the soft hum of the heating system seemed loud. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Her mouth opened slightly, and she tilted her head, the way people do when they are hearing something they cannot quite believe. "Mommy?" Emma said, her voice small and uncertain. "I'm right here, baby," Lily said, her own voice breaking. "I'm right here." Emma's whole body seemed to light up. She reached out and touched her mother's cheek, then her own ear, then her mother's cheek again, like she was trying to understand how such a thing could be true. "Say it again," Emma whispered. "Say it again, Mommy." Lily laughed through her tears, a sound that was half joy and half disbelief. "I love you," she said clearly, slowly, watching her daughter's face the whole time. "I love you so much, Emma." Emma's eyes went wide. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she threw her arms around her mother's neck, holding on tight the way she had the day the letter arrived. "Mommy," Emma said against her shoulder, her voice thick with tears. "Your voice sounds beautiful." The room broke. Grown men in leather vests who had ridden through storms and buried brothers and never shed a tear in public were wiping their eyes without shame. Housekeepers who had scrubbed floors that very morning pressed their hands to their mouths. Daniel, standing near the back, felt his throat tighten as he watched Lily rock her daughter gently back and forth. Cole stood off to the side, watching quietly, his hands in his pockets. He did not need applause or thanks. Seeing Emma's face, seeing Lily's tears of joy instead of fear, was enough. Somewhere behind him, someone began to clap softly. Then another. Then the whole room rose to their feet, applause filling the ballroom like thunder, gentle and warm, wrapping around a mother and daughter who had waited so long for this exact moment. Emma pulled back from her mother's shoulder, looking around at all the people clapping, her small face full of wonder at the sound of it all. The morning after Emma's miracle, the sun came up over Silver Pines like any other day. But by the time Cole walked into his office, his phone was already buzzing with calls he did not want to answer. Daniel was waiting for him, his face pale, a tablet clutched in his hands. "You need to see this," Daniel said. Cole took the tablet. On the screen was a news article, the kind that spreads fast and ugly. The headline read, "Biker businessman uses charity as cover for hidden agenda." Below it was a photo of Cole from years ago, taken when he was younger, standing outside a bar with his motorcycle brothers. It was an old photo. It was innocent. But next to it, someone had written words meant to make him look dangerous. Cole scrolled further. The article claimed the Silver Pines Accessibility Foundation was not a real charity at all. It said Cole was using sick children and struggling families to build a better image for himself after years of what it called questionable associations. It even suggested that the foundation's money was not going where it was supposed to go. None of it was true. But Cole knew that did not matter to people who wanted to believe the worst. "This is Grant," Cole said quietly. "This has his fingerprints all over it." Daniel nodded. 3 more investors called this morning. They want out. They say the resort's reputation cannot survive this kind of story. Cole set the tablet down on his desk. His jaw was tight, but his voice stayed calm. "Let them call. We built this place on truth. That does not change because one man wants to burn it down." But even as he said it, Cole felt the weight of it pressing on his chest. He thought of Emma's face the night before, the way she had heard her mother's voice for the first time. He thought of Lily's tears. He would not let anyone turn that moment into a lie. By afternoon, Vanessa arrived at the resort. She walked through the lobby with her chin high, but her eyes were red, like she had not slept. She found Cole in the small conference room where he had been fielding phone calls all day. "I know what he's doing," Vanessa said. "I know my husband." "Vanessa, you don't have to be here for this," Cole said. "Yes, I do." Her voice was steady, steadier than Cole had ever heard it. "I have hidden for years. I let Grant control what I said, what I did, who I was allowed to help. Emma's smile last night changed something in me. I am done hiding." That evening, at a small gathering of remaining investors and staff, Grant showed up uninvited. He walked into the room like he still owned it, his suit pressed, his smile sharp as a blade. "Vanessa," he said, spotting his wife across the room, "come home. This foolishness has gone far enough." The room went quiet. Every eye turned toward them. Vanessa did not move toward him. Instead, she stepped forward, closer to the center of the room, where everyone could see her. "No," she said. Grant's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "I said no, Grant." Vanessa's voice shook, but she did not stop. "For years I stood next to you and said nothing while you hurt people. I watched you humiliate a woman who was only trying to protect her daughter's future. I stayed silent because I was afraid of what you would do if I spoke up. I am not afraid anymore." Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel stood frozen near the doorway. Cole watched, his arms crossed, saying nothing, letting Vanessa have this moment. "You are done," Vanessa continued. "I am done. I am staying here, at this foundation, doing work that actually means something." Grant's face turned red with fury. "You will regret this," he hissed. "I am taking everything that is mine, the accounts, the properties we share. You will have nothing." "Then take it," Vanessa said, her voice breaking but her spine straight. "I would rather have nothing and a clear conscience than everything and be your wife for one more day." Grant stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Within the hour, Daniel's phone buzzed with an alert from the resort's financial office. Grant had already begun moving money, freezing accounts tied to Vanessa's name, threatening the fragile stability the resort had left. That night, Cole walked through Silver Pines alone. The lobby, so full of noise and laughter just hours before, was empty now. The big stone fireplace still crackled, but nobody sat near it. The chairs were empty. The long wooden tables where families had eaten dinner together sat wiped clean and bare. Cole's boots made soft sounds on the floor as he walked, the only sound besides the wind outside pushing against the windows. He stopped near the fireplace and looked up at the tall windows that showed the dark mountains outside. Snow had started falling again, soft and quiet, covering the world in white. Cole thought about the first day he bought this land. He was younger then, angrier, still carrying the weight of everything he had lost. He remembered standing on this same spot, looking at nothing but trees and dirt, and promising himself he would build something good here. Something that mattered. Not just a resort for rich people to relax in, but a place where everyone, no matter who they were, could feel like they belonged. Now he wondered if that promise was slipping through his fingers. He pulled out his phone and looked at the messages again. 3 more investors wanted out. The article was spreading online, shared by people who had never met him, never seen the work he had done, never watched Emma's face light up when she heard her mother's voice for the first time. They only saw the headline. They only saw the old photo of a man in a leather vest standing outside a bar, and they believed the worst. Cole sat down in one of the big leather chairs by the fire. He rubbed his hands over his face, feeling the tiredness settle into his bones. Maybe I should have just kept my head down, he said quietly to the empty room. Maybe I should have let things stay the way they were. The old system had been profitable. Nobody complained when the rich guests were treated like kings and the workers stayed invisible. Nobody wrote articles calling him a liar. Nobody threatened to take away everything Vanessa had built. Things were easier when Cole stayed quiet, when he let the world believe whatever it wanted to believe about people like Lily, people like Emma, people like himself. But easier was not the same as right. Cole stared into the fire, watching the flames twist and curl, and for the first time in a long while, he felt unsure of himself. Cole? He turned. Lily stood in the doorway, still wearing her work clothes, a light jacket pulled over her shoulders. She must have been finishing a late shift. Her hair was pulled back, and her eyes were tired. But there was something steady in the way she looked at him. You should be home with Emma, Cole said. She's asleep, Lily said, walking closer. First good night's sleep she's had in weeks. She kept the hearing device on her nightstand like it was the most precious thing in the world. She smiled, small and warm. She probably will not take it off tomorrow either. Cole managed a tired smile back, but it did not reach his eyes. Lily sat down across from him, near the fire. You look like a man carrying the whole mountain on his back. Maybe I am, Cole admitted. Grant's tearing this place apart. Investors are running. People believe I built that foundation just to make myself look good. He shook his head. I keep asking myself if any of this was worth it. Lily was quiet for a moment, watching the fire. Then she said, Can I tell you something? Cole nodded. Last night, when Emma heard my voice for the first time, Lily said, her voice trembling slightly, she looked at me like I had just given her the whole world. She said my voice was beautiful. Do you know how long I dreamed of hearing her say something like that? Cole did not answer. He just listened. Money comes and goes, Lily continued. Investors will come and go too, but that moment, Cole, that moment cannot be undone. No article, no angry man in a suit, nothing can take that away from us. She looked at him steadily. Some things are worth losing money for, like giving people hope. Cole looked at her, and for the first time that night, something inside his chest loosened just a little. The next morning, the sun had not fully climbed over the mountains when the staff break room began to fill. It was not a big room, just a square space behind the kitchen with a coffee machine that always ran a little too hot, and a table someone had bought second-hand years ago. But that morning, it did not feel small. It felt full of something warm. Rosa, who had worked in housekeeping for 11 years, was the first to speak. I remember when Mr. Whitmore complained about my cart being in the hallway, she said, wrapping her hands around a paper cup of coffee. Just complained, that's all. And the old manager before Daniel, he wrote me up. A write-up. For a cart. Nobody said anything, but heads nodded around the table. I got yelled at for bringing the wrong pillow, said a young man named Thomas, who worked the front desk. The guest wanted a firmer pillow. I brought a soft one by mistake. He told Daniel I should be fired. I stood there and just took it. What else could I do? I needed the job. Daniel stood near the doorway, arms crossed, listening. His face looked tired, the same tired look he had worn since the night he watched Lily get sent away from the lobby. He did not try to defend himself. He just listened, the way a man listens when he knows he has some things to answer for. It was always like that, Rosa continued. Smile no matter what. Say sorry no matter what. Guest is always right, even when the guest is wrong, even when the guest is cruel. Cole changed that, Lily said. She had come in quietly, her jacket still smelling like snow. You all saw what he did. He didn't just say things needed to change. He wrote it down. New rules, real ones. My cousin works front desk over at the Ashford place, Thomas said. You know what they still do there? Same as here before. Guests scream, guests threaten, and management just says, sorry, so sorry, please don't leave a bad review. Nobody there would ever stand up for us like Cole did. Daniel finally spoke, his voice quiet. I should have stood up for Lily that night. I didn't. I was scared of losing the Whitmore's business. I let fear make the decision instead of doing what was right. He looked around the room. Cole did what I should have done a long time ago. He didn't need this job. He owns the whole resort. But he sat there and let a rich man call him poor, just so he could see how we were really treated. And when he saw the truth, he didn't punish us for it. He tried to fix it. Rosa nodded slowly. And now people online are saying he's a liar, saying the foundation is fake, saying he's using Emma's story to make himself look good. That's not what happened, Lily said, and her voice cracked just slightly. I was there. Emma heard my voice for the first time because of that foundation. That was not fake. That was the realest thing I've ever seen. The room fell silent for a moment. Outside, snow was still falling, quiet and steady, coating the parking lot in white. Then Thomas set down his coffee cup. So what do we do? Just sit here and let people believe lies about him? No, Rosa said, firm now. We tell the truth. All of us. We say what it was like before and what it's like now. Daniel looked around the room, at faces that had once been afraid to speak up, now leaning forward, ready to be heard. We could write something, he said. Something real. Not some fancy statement from a lawyer. Just us. Our names, our stories. Lily wiped her eyes and smiled. Emma always says the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone brave enough to say it. One by one, hands went up around the table. Rosa, Thomas, the cooks who had slipped in during the conversation, the maintenance crew. Even the youngest new hire, barely 3 weeks on the job, raised her hand and said, I want my name on it too. He already changed things for me. Daniel looked at Lily, then at the group gathered around that old second-hand table, coffee going cold, snow falling outside the window. Let's tell them who Cole Mercer really is, he said, and every person in that room nodded. The letter went up on the resort's website that same afternoon. Daniel typed it himself, his 2 fingers slow on the keyboard, while Rosa read the words out loud to make sure they sounded right. It was not fancy. It did not use big words. It just told the truth, plain and simple, the way Lily said it should be told. By evening, it had been shared more than 10,000 times. The next morning, more letters started coming in, not from Silver Pines employees this time, but from people who had never even stayed at the resort. A woman named Patricia wrote about her son, born with a heart condition, and how a foundation just like Cole's had covered the cost of a surgery her family could never afford. She said she did not know Cole personally, but she recognized his kind of goodness. She had seen it before in her own life, from strangers who never asked for anything in return. A man named Robert shared a story about his father, a veteran who had ridden motorcycles for 40 years and been treated like trash in restaurants and hotels because of his leather vest and gray beard. Robert said reading about Cole made him think of his father, and how much it would have meant to him to be seen as more than his appearance. Then came Emma's video. Lily had not planned to share it. It was something private, something she recorded on her phone the day Emma first heard her voice through the new hearing device. But Rosa had asked, gently, if Lily might consider letting people see it. Just a few seconds. Enough to show them what was real. Lily thought about it for 2 days. Then she said yes. The video showed Emma, her small hands pressed against the sides of the hearing device, her eyes wide with wonder as Lily knelt in front of her and said, "I love you, baby." Emma's face crumpled, not from sadness, but from something deeper. She threw her arms around her mother's neck and said, the words a little clumsy but full of joy, "Mommy, your voice sounds beautiful." The video spread across the internet faster than anyone expected. People who had never heard of Silver Pines Resort were suddenly typing Cole Mercer's name into search engines, wanting to know more about the biker who had built a foundation to help children like Emma. Reporters called the resort asking for interviews. Daniel handled some of them, always giving credit to Cole, never taking it for himself. Rosa and Thomas spoke too, telling their own stories about being treated as if they did not matter, and how that had changed the moment Cole stepped through the front doors of his own resort, disguised as a stranger. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The comments online, once filled with doubt and cruel jokes about a biker playing hero, began to shift. People who had shared Grant's accusations started deleting their posts. Others wrote long apologies, admitting they had judged too quickly. Within a week, the resort's phone lines were busier than they had been in months. Not with cancellations this time, but with new reservations. Families called asking about the Accessibility Foundation, wanting to know how they could support it, or if their own children could benefit from its programs. A businesswoman from Denver booked an entire weekend package after watching Emma's video 3 times, saying she wanted her own daughters to see a place where kindness meant something. An older couple, the Andersons, arrived on a Friday evening pulling suitcases through the snow. They had read every article, every post, every letter from the staff. When Daniel greeted them at the front desk, Mrs. Anderson took his hand and said, "We came because we wanted to see the place that chose people over money. We wanted our grandchildren to stay somewhere like this." Daniel smiled, a real smile, the kind he had not worn in weeks. "Then you're in the right place," he said. By the following weekend, the lobby that had once gone silent with humiliation was filled again, this time with laughter and warmth. Families gathered by the fireplace where Cole had once sat quietly in his leather vest, dismissed as someone who did not belong. Now, guests spoke his name with respect, even reverence, many of them hoping just to catch a glimpse of the man who had changed everything by refusing to change who he was. Grant Whitmore sat alone in his office, the one that used to feel like a throne room. Now it felt like a cage. His phone buzzed on the desk. Another email. He almost did not want to open it, but he made himself look. It was from Marcus Chen, his business partner of 12 years. The subject line was short. "Reconsidering our partnership." Grant's hands shook as he read the words. Marcus said he had watched the video of Emma. He said he had read the articles. He said he could no longer be associated with someone who treated hard-working people the way Grant had treated Lily Harper. "This is not personal," Marcus wrote. "This is business, and right now your name is bad for business." Grant threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and cracked, but he did not care. He poured himself a drink, though it was only 10 in the morning, and sat in the silence of his empty office. The calls kept coming after that. One by one his partners backed away. Some were polite about it, saying they needed to protect their brands. Others were blunt, telling him flat out that nobody wanted to work with a man who mocked a child's chance at a normal life. His country club revoked his membership, quietly, without much explanation. A letter simply arrived saying the board had decided to reevaluate his standing. Grant knew what that meant. He had seen it happen to other men he used to laugh about over expensive dinners. Now he was the punchline. Vanessa was gone too. She had taken her half of their finances and moved into a small apartment near the resort, closer to her new work with the foundation. Grant told himself he did not care. He told himself he was better off without her soft heart and her constant worry about people who did not matter. But at night, alone in his big, empty house, he could not stop thinking about her face when she told him she would not be controlled by fear anymore. He could not stop thinking about the video of that little girl crying tears of joy, saying her mother's voice sounded beautiful. Grant tried to rebuild. He reached out to old friends, old clients, anyone who might still answer his calls. Most did not. The few who did seemed distant, careful, like they were talking to someone contagious. One afternoon, sitting in his empty office with nothing left to do, Grant realized something. All his life, he had believed money made him powerful. He believed it made people respect him. But now the money was still there, most of it anyway, and nobody respected him at all. He thought about Cole Mercer, the biker in the leather vest, the man he had humiliated in front of a room full of people, the man who had never raised his voice, never lost his temper, never once tried to destroy Grant the way Grant had tried to destroy him. Something in Grant's chest twisted. It was not quite guilt. Not yet. But it was close. He got in his car and drove to Silver Pines Resort. The drive felt longer than he remembered. Snow covered the mountains just like it had the first night everything went wrong. Grant gripped the steering wheel, unsure what he wanted. Part of him wanted to walk in and demand answers, to show them all he was still a man of power. Another part of him, quieter and smaller, just wanted to understand why none of it had worked out the way he expected. When he arrived, the lobby was full of warmth and laughter, the exact opposite of how he remembered it. Families sat by the fireplace. A group of children played near the front desk while their parents talked with the staff. Grant stood there for a moment, out of place in his expensive coat, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. Daniel spotted him first. His face went pale, but he did not turn away. He walked toward the back office and returned a moment later, followed by Cole. Cole walked out slowly, calm as always, his leather vest still worn, his eyes steady. He did not look angry. He did not look victorious. He simply looked at Grant the way he had looked at him that very first night, like he was seeing a person, not a threat. "Grant," Cole said quietly, "I wondered when you'd come back." Vanessa arrived at the small office at Silver Pines a full hour before she needed to. She had not slept much the night before. She kept thinking about what today meant. This was not a favor. This was not a hobby to make herself feel better. This was her job now. Director of the Silver Pines Accessibility Foundation. Her name on the door. Her name on the paperwork. She smoothed down her blazer and looked at the small brass plaque that had just been installed. Vanessa Whitmore. Director? She touched the letters with her fingers, half expecting them to feel fake, like a costume she was not allowed to wear. But they were real. Cole had made sure of that. The first family walked in at 9 o'clock sharp. A mother named Rosa, holding the hand of a boy named Mateo, who was maybe 8 years old. Mateo wore a hearing aid that looked cracked and old, held together with tape on one side. "It stopped working right last month," Rosa explained, her voice tired in the way Vanessa recognized from Lily. The same worry. The same exhaustion of trying to hold everything together with not enough money and too much love. "The school says he is falling behind because he cannot hear the teacher. I have been saving, but it is not enough yet." Vanessa knelt down so she was eye level with Mateo. She did not say anything at first. She just looked at him, at the way he watched her lips carefully. the way he leaned forward slightly to catch every word. "I used to wear one just like that," Vanessa said softly. "When I was your age?" Matteo's eyes went wide. "You did?" "I did. Mine broke too. More than once." She smiled. "It made me feel different, like I did not belong. But I want you to know something, Matteo. Being different is not something to be ashamed of. It just means you hear the world in your own special way." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "You understand," she whispered. "Most people just feel sorry for us. You understand." "I do," Vanessa said. "And we are going to get Matteo a new device. Today, if we can manage it. You will not have to save anymore." Rosa broke down crying right there in the small office, and Vanessa held her hand until the tears slowed. This was the fourth family that week. Each one carried the same fear, the same tired hope, the same quiet dignity that reminded Vanessa so much of the little girl who had cried tears of joy when she first heard her mother's voice. By the end of the day, Vanessa had met with 3 more families. A little girl named Aisha who wanted to hear music again. A teenage boy named Corey who had stopped speaking up in class because he was embarrassed about his hearing aids. An older woman named Patricia who was helping raise her grandson and could not afford the device he needed for school. Each story chipped away at something old inside Vanessa. For years, she had been Grant Whitmore's wife. She had been the woman who stood beside him at dinners, smiled for photographs, stayed quiet when he spoke over people who mattered. She had let that version of herself become smaller and smaller until she almost forgot there was another woman underneath. One who understood pain, one who wanted to help. That evening, as she locked up the small foundation office, Daniel stopped by to check on her. "How was the first day?" he asked. Vanessa looked back at the office, at the brass plaque, at the folders full of families waiting for help. "It was the first day I have felt like myself in 20 years, she said honestly. Daniel smiled. "Cole said you would be good at this." "I did not think I deserved a chance to be good at anything," Vanessa admitted. "Not after everything." "People change," Daniel said. "You are proof of that." Word spread quickly through the resort and beyond. Employees who once only knew her as Grant Whitmore's silent wife began greeting her by name, asking about the foundation, thanking her for the children she had already helped. Guests who read about the story online sent donations addressed simply to Vanessa, not to the resort, not to Cole. To her. She was no longer defined by the man she left behind. She was defined by the hope she gave to a boy with a broken hearing aid, a girl who wanted to hear music, a grandmother trying to help her grandson succeed in school. For the first time in her life, Vanessa Whitmore was known for her own kindness. Months passed, and Silver Pines Resort did not look the same anymore. It did not look different because of new paint or new furniture. It looked different because of the people inside it. The lobby, once a place where guests in designer coats looked down their noses at anyone who seemed out of place, was now filled with a different kind of energy. Housekeepers smiled without looking over their shoulders. Front desk workers laughed with guests instead of flinching when someone raised their voice. The fireplace where Cole had once sat alone, judged and dismissed, now had children gathered around it, roasting marshmallows while their parents talked and laughed nearby. Daniel Brooks walked through the lobby every morning now with a different kind of confidence. He no longer scanned the room looking for wealthy guests to please. Instead, he checked in with his staff first, asking how they were doing, making sure nobody felt invisible. He had learned that lesson the hard way, and he carried it with him every single day. Lily still worked at the resort, though her job had changed. She now trained new housekeepers, teaching them not just how to fold towels or clean rooms, but how to hold their heads high no matter who they served. She often told them the story of the day a rich man told a stranger he was too poor to be there, and how that stranger turned out to own the whole building. The new employees always listened closely to that story. It reminded them that respect had nothing to do with money. Emma had grown taller. Her hearing device fit her now like it had always been part of her, and she used it every single day at school, at home, and at Silver Pines, where she often visited her mother during breaks. She loved running through the lobby, greeting guests, showing off the new drawings she had made in art class. She was no longer the shy little girl who struggled to keep up in a loud classroom. She was becoming confident, curious, and full of joy. Vanessa's foundation had grown too. What started as a small office with a brass plaque had become a real program, helping dozens of families every month. She had hired 2 more people to help her keep up with the number of families reaching out for help. She often stayed late, going over paperwork, making calls, making sure every child who needed a hearing device or a mobility tool got what they needed as quickly as possible. She rarely thought about Grant anymore. When she did, it was without anger, just a quiet understanding that she had become someone entirely new, someone she was proud of. The resort itself had recovered from the storm Grant tried to create. The investors who once threatened to pull out had stayed, impressed by how quickly people rallied around Cole's vision. New guests arrived not for luxury alone, but because they wanted to be part of something that felt real, something that felt good. Word had spread across the country about the resort, with the biker owner who cared more about people than profit, and families came just to see it for themselves. On a bright autumn afternoon, the resort prepared for its biggest event of the year. Every autumn, Silver Pines held a celebration to mark another year of growth, another year of change. Staff decorated the lobby with string lights and warm lanterns. Local families who had been helped by the foundation arrived early, setting up tables with food they had cooked themselves. Laughter echoed through the halls in a way it never had before Cole arrived. Cole stood near the front entrance, watching everything come together. He wore his usual leather vest, the same one that had made people assume he did not belong here so many months ago. Now, employees waved at him with real smiles. Guests shook his hand, not out of politeness, but out of genuine respect. He looked out toward the long mountain road leading up to the resort. In the distance, he could hear it before he could see it. The deep rumble of engines growing louder, echoing off the tall pine trees. His Hells Angel brothers were arriving right on time, just like every year. Cole smiled, feeling something settle deep in his chest. Pride. Not the kind of pride that came from money or power, but the kind that came from watching people find their worth. The kind that came from building something that made people feel like they belonged. The rumble grew louder, rolling down the mountain road like distant thunder. Cole stood by the entrance, hands in the pockets of his worn jeans, watching the tree line where the road curved out of sight. "Cole!" He turned at the sound of his name and saw Emma running across the lobby, her sneakers slapping against the wood floor. Her hearing device sat behind her ear, small and steady, a piece of her now like it had always belonged there. Lily followed behind, walking instead of running, but her smile was just as big as her daughter's. "Cole! Cole!" Emma skidded to a stop in front of him, nearly out of breath. "I heard them. I heard them before I even saw them." Cole crouched down to her level, the way he always did when he talked to her. It was a habit he had picked up months ago, back when Emma was still shy and unsure, back before the device, back before she trusted her own ears to tell her the truth about the world. Heard what, kiddo? He asked, even though he already knew the answer. He wanted to hear her say it. The motorcycles! Emma's eyes were wide and bright. I heard the engines outside, all the way from the parking lot. Mommy said I probably couldn't hear them yet because they were still so far away, but I heard them anyway. Lily caught up and stood beside her daughter, brushing a strand of hair away from Emma's face. She wouldn't stop talking about it the whole walk over, Lily said, her voice thick with something between laughter and tears. She kept saying, "Listen, Mommy, listen." Like I couldn't hear it either. Cole looked at Emma, really looked at her. He remembered the first time he had met her, back when she was quieter, back when she used to watch people's mouths instead of listening for their voices, trying to catch words she could not always hear clearly. Now she stood in front of him, practically vibrating with excitement over the sound of engines she once might have missed completely. That's a good ear you got there, Cole said, tapping his own ear. Better than mine, probably. I've been riding with those guys for 20 years, and half the time I still can't tell if that's Big Ray's bike or Smokey's. Emma giggled. It's Big Ray's. His is louder. It sounds like it coughs a little before it gets going. Cole laughed, a deep sound that came from somewhere warm in his chest. You're right. That coughing sound means his engine needs work. I keep telling him that. Lily watched the two of them, her arms crossed loosely, her eyes soft. There was a stillness in her that had not been there before. Cole remembered the woman he had first met in this very lobby, exhausted after a long shift, staring at a photograph of her daughter with fear in her eyes, because she did not know how she would ever afford to help her here. That fear was gone now. What replaced it was something steadier, something like peace. The rumble outside grew louder still, and now everyone could hear it, not just Emma. Headlights began to appear through the trees, one after another, a long line of motorcycles winding up the mountain road toward the resort. The chrome caught the afternoon sun and threw it back in bright flashes. They're here! Emma shouted, and without waiting for permission, she took off toward the front doors, her hearing device catching the sunlight as she ran. Lily started after her, but Cole placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Let her go, he said. They know her. They'll take care of her. Lily paused, watching her daughter push open the heavy doors and run out into the afternoon light toward the growing line of bikes. Big Ray was already climbing off his motorcycle, pulling off his helmet, and grinning when he spotted Emma running toward him. He opened his arms wide, and Emma jumped into them like she had done it 100 times before. She loves them, Lily said quietly, watching through the glass doors. She loves all of them. They love her too, Cole said. Lily turned to him, and for a moment neither of them said anything. The lobby around them buzzed with the sounds of the celebration coming together, string lights glowing warm against the afternoon shadows, tables filling with food, laughter drifting from every corner of the resort. I never thought I'd feel this happy, Lily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not after everything. Not after being so scared all the time. Cole nodded slowly, watching through the window as more of his brothers dismounted their bikes, greeting Emma one by one, letting her show off her hearing device, listening as she told them all about how she had heard their engines from far away. Smokey lifted her up onto his shoulders so she could see the whole line of motorcycles parked along the drive, and her laughter rang out clear and bright across the mountain air. Happiness looks good on you, Lily, Cole said. Lily smiled, watching her daughter laugh in the arms of people who had once been strangers, now family. It looks good on all of us. The lobby of Silver Pines had never looked so alive. Where once the marble floors had echoed with cold silence and cruel words, now they rang with laughter. The same fireplace where Cole had sat quietly, dismissed and judged, now crackled warm behind a crowd of people who had no reason to stand together except that they wanted to. Housekeepers in their uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder with guests in fine coats. Big Ray, still smelling faintly of motor oil, clinked glasses with a woman wearing a diamond bracelet, and neither of them seemed to notice the difference between them at all. Daniel Brooks moved through the crowd with a tray of drinks, but he was not doing it out of fear anymore. He stopped and laughed at something one of the kitchen staff said, threw his head back, and looked, for the first time in longer than Cole could remember, like a man who was not afraid of losing his job. Cole stood near the doorway, watching it all. His leather vest was the same one he always wore, the one that had made people whisper and stare and judge him as poor, as dangerous, as someone who did not belong. Now, no one looked at it twice. They looked at his face instead. They looked at his eyes. Vanessa found him there, a glass of sparkling water in her hand instead of champagne. She had changed in the months since the foundation started. There was color in her cheeks now, a steadiness in the way she carried herself, like a woman who had finally stopped shrinking. "Grant called this morning," she said quietly, standing beside Cole. "He wanted to know if there was still a place for him here." Cole did not answer right away. He watched Lily across the room, kneeling down to tie Emma's shoe, laughing at something the little girl said. "What did you tell him?" Cole asked. "I told him the door was open," Vanessa said. "But he'd have to walk through it like everyone else. No shortcuts, no money buying his way back in." Cole nodded slowly. "That's fair." "Is it enough?" Vanessa asked. There was an old worry in her voice, the same one that had haunted her for years, the fear that kindness without conditions was somehow foolish. "It's more than fair," Cole said. "It's mercy. That's rarer than money, and worth a whole lot more." Vanessa smiled, small and real, and moved back into the crowd to find Daniel, who was showing off the new accessibility ramp they had built near the east wing, proud as if he had built it himself. Cole watched Emma break away from her mother and run toward Smokey, who scooped her up onto his shoulders again, higher this time, so she could see over the heads of the crowd. She pointed toward the string lights strung across the ceiling and shouted something about how they looked like stars that had come down just for tonight. Her voice carried clear and easy across the room, no longer a whisper of fear about being misunderstood. Lily stood back and watched her daughter with the kind of look that only a mother carries. Then she caught Cole's eye from across the lobby and gave him a small nod, a thank you that needed no words. Cole thought about the resort then, really thought about it. The marble floors, the chandeliers, the fireplace that had cost more than most people made in a year. None of it had ever been the point. He had built Silver Pines with his hands, and his money, and his years of hard work. But somewhere along the way, without him even realizing it, the true value of the place had shifted into something else entirely. It was not the luxury that made Silver Pines matter. It was the people inside it. It was Lily's courage. It was Emma's laughter. It was Vanessa's quiet bravery and Daniel's growth, and the way his brothers, rough and loud and tattooed, had become gentle uncles to a little girl who once could not hear her own mother's voice. Wealth had never been about the money in his accounts or the size of his resort. It was measured in moments like this one, in a lobby full of people who belonged to each other, who had chosen kindness even when it cost them something. Cole slipped quietly out the front doors into the cool evening air, leaving the warmth and light behind him for just a moment. The mountains stood dark and steady against the sky, the same as they always had. He looked back once through the glass at the celebration glowing inside, at the family he had built without ever meaning to. He had come to Silver Pines to build a resort. He was leaving it having built a home. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.